Have you ever looked at the faces of your children? The very ones you raised, sacrificed for, stayed up worrying about, and wondered how they could speak to you that way? How they could ignore your calls, take your kindness for granted, or turn cold overnight as if you were a stranger? It's a pain no parent prepares for. Not the scraped knees, not the sleepless nights, not the bills. They were all worth it. But this ache that comes from your own child turning their back on you, that's something else entirely. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many older adults, people just like you, quietly carry the weight of disappointment, rejection, and deep emotional wounds caused by the very people they once held in their arms. And yet most never talk about it. They swallow it. They put on a brave face. But I want you to hear this clearly today. You are not weak for feeling hurt. You are human. And what you choose to do with that hurt, that's where your strength begins. In this video, we're going to talk about what to do when you've been deeply hurt by your kids. Not in a petty way, not in a vengeful way, but in a way that helps you rise, recover, and return to peace. No yelling, no chasing, no guilt trips. Just quiet strength and emotional clarity. Let's begin with something that may sound simple, but it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Feel it once and never again. When someone you love wounds you, especially your child, it cuts deep. The temptation is to keep picking at the pain, to replay what they said or didn't say, to go over the moment they turned cold or the time they didn't show up. But the truth is, the pain doesn't live in the event. It lives in the replay. When your child hurt you, whether through words, distance, or neglect, your body and mind recorded it. Like a scratch on a record, it repeats over and over, and each time you feel it again. But here's the thing. You don't have to keep reliving it. You're allowed to feel the hurt fully, once. Cry if you need to. Get angry if you must. Journal, walk, pray, scream into a pillow. Whatever it takes, let it out of your system. Then stop. Close the door to that moment. Not because it didn't matter, but because it did. And because it's over. You're not pretending it didn't hurt. You're just choosing not to live inside the wound. That's not denial. That's healing. There's a difference. When you carry pain every day like a badge of love, it stops being love and starts becoming self-harm. You deserve peace. You've earned peace. And the only way to find it is to feel it once. Let it teach you what it needed to, and then let it pass. What you're building now is not about forgetting. It's about not letting the past define your every tomorrow. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you. Silence. That's right. When your child hurts you, it's natural to want to say something, to explain, to get them to understand how deeply their actions affected you. But silence, when used correctly, is not weakness. It's power. There's a kind of quiet that speaks louder than shouting. A kind of stillness that says more than any long speech. When someone hurts you and you respond not with arguments or pleas, but with stillness, that's when your power begins to return. Why? Because you are no longer trying to control their reaction. You are no longer handing them your peace. They expected you to react, didn't they? They expected a call, a text, a guilt trip, maybe even a tearful voicemail. But you didn't give it. You gave silence. And in that silence, they begin to sit with what they did. They begin to wonder. The absence of your words becomes heavier than any sentence you could have spoken. Now that silence isn't about revenge. It's not about playing games. It's about reclaiming your peace. It's about choosing not to argue with someone who's already made their decision. It's about understanding that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your pain, especially not someone who didn't care when they caused it. Think about this. When a door closes quietly, it stays closed. When it slams, people tend to reopen it just to argue some more. Quiet is final. Quiet is clarity. And here's something else to remember. Not everyone deserves to know how you feel, especially those who've already shown you they don't care. Silence then becomes your boundary. It says, I love myself too much to keep talking to someone who no longer listens. It says, I can grieve you without inviting you to witness it. It says, I'm done explaining. And that leads us to something just as powerful. You don't have to explain yourself anymore. One of the most draining things we do after being hurt is to try and get the other person to see things from our side. We hope that if we just say the right thing at the right time, maybe they'll finally get it. But most of the time, they won't. And even if they do, it won't change much. Not because you weren't right, but because they're not ready. When someone hurts you, and you try to explain yourself, you're not seeking connection. You're seeking permission to feel what you already feel. And you don't need permission for that. You're allowed to be hurt. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to walk away. If they didn't care to ask how you felt, they don't deserve a front row seat to your pain now. The moment you stop explaining, you stop giving them the power to define what happened. You stop letting them rewrite the story to fit their comfort. And you begin writing a new one for yourself, one where your voice is not something you throw out hoping for understanding. It's something you use to guide your own healing. When you stop explaining, you stop needing closure from them and start giving it to yourself. That's real growth. That's real power. So now ask yourself, what would it feel like to just stop? To stop trying to make them understand. To stop picking at the past. To stop responding to every jab, silence, or manipulation. What if you just stepped back? What if you took all that energy and gave it to yourself instead? Because let me tell you something. Your peace is not up for negotiation. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to say nothing at all. Now that you've stopped explaining yourself, a quiet strength begins to settle in. Maybe for the first time in a long time you feel space between their choices and your emotions. This is where something powerful starts to grow. Indifference. Not coldness. Not bitterness. But true indifference. The kind that doesn't pretend not to care. It simply doesn't need to anymore. It's a shift that happens deep inside. At first, you may still flinch when their name pops up. You may still wonder what they're doing, who they talk to more than you, whether they even think about you. That's natural. But slowly you begin to realize something. You don't have to orbit their life anymore. You don't have to be on standby, waiting for a better version of them to show up. Your peace doesn't have to depend on their attention. True indifference doesn't mean you wish them harm. It means you've stopped needing them to fix the harm they caused. It means you no longer offer them space in your heart that they've repeatedly disrespected. When your energy no longer rises and falls based on whether they call, text, or show up, it's not because you're angry. It's because you've reclaimed your center. Here's something important to know. People can feel when you detach, especially if they were used to you being available no matter what. At first, they might not notice. But then, something shifts. Your silence becomes unfamiliar. Your absence creates a space they don't know how to fill. That's when curiosity creeps in. That's when your quiet begins to speak louder than all the messages they never answered. And now you stand at a crossroads. You can chase or you can reflect. Because here's the hard truth. Every time they pulled away and you chased, every time they dismissed you and you stayed kind, every time you swallowed your hurt just to keep the peace, you were teaching them how to treat you. Not because you deserved it, but because you never showed them a different response. But that changes now. You're no longer here to be their emotional cushion. You're not here to soothe the discomfort they caused. From now on, you are their mirror, not their pet. That means when they go cold, You don't lean in, you step back. When they get distant, you don't beg, you create space. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to reflect exactly what they gave you. This is how you protect your dignity without raising your voice. When they feel the absence of your support, they will either mature or move on. Either way, you win. Because the goal is never control. It's clarity. And sometimes clarity comes not from confrontation, but from quiet alignment. And if you're thinking, but I'm their parent, I should always be there. I want to tell you this gently. Being a parent doesn't mean being a doormat. Love with boundaries is still love. You can be a steady presence without sacrificing your peace. You can care deeply without carrying the weight of their emotional immaturity. So what now? You rebuild. You don't wait for them to return. You don't spend your days watching your phone. You build your fortress. Brick by brick, day by day, you create a life that feels strong again. A life that honors your time, your energy, your talents. Maybe you take that class you've been thinking about. Maybe you go for that daily walk. Maybe you start journaling or join a local group that makes you feel connected again. Whatever it is, make it yours. Make it solid. Because when you build a life that feels full, without needing anyone to fill the empty spaces, you become untouchable. Not because you've shut people out, but because you've stopped needing them to stay in order to feel complete. This rebuilding isn't just about staying busy. It's about transformation. When your child hurt you, they created a space you didn't ask for. But now, you have a choice. You can use that space to suffer. Or you can use it to rise. You can decide to be the kind of person who turns heartbreak into strength, silence into self-respect, and absence into peace. That's how you build your fortress. Not with walls to keep people out, but with boundaries that protect what matters. Your spirit, your heart, your mind. This life you're building? It's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming every part of you that you once gave away too easily. And here's one of the most important things I can say to you right now. Once you've committed to protecting your peace, never go back. Never break no contact. Not because you're angry, but because you're healing. The moment you reach out just to check in, just to be nice, you risk unraveling all the progress you've made. I know it's tempting. I know it feels like maybe just one message will make a difference. But let me ask you, when has chasing peace ever brought you peace? Every time you break your silence, you hand them the emotional keys again. And when someone's already shown they don't know how to drive carefully, why give them another chance to crash into your heart? No contact isn't a punishment. It's protection. It's not cruelty. It's clarity. It's a declaration. I choose to heal, even if you never apologize, even if you never come back. And trust me, the longer you stay silent, the louder your absence becomes. Not to them, but to you. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You begin to listen to your own needs. That stillness becomes sacred. Because here's the truth many don't like to admit. The person who walks away and stays gone, peacefully, confidently, silently, always holds the power. Not because they're trying to win, but because they're already free. By now you've stopped explaining, you've held your silence, and you've begun building something new. You've probably noticed it already, a change in how you breathe, how you sleep, how you carry yourself. The ache may still be there from time to time, but something is different. It no longer controls you. And that shift? That's something your children may eventually notice too. They always come back. Not always with words. Sometimes with a glance, a question, a birthday text after years of silence. Sometimes it's subtle, liking an old photo, checking in through someone else, a vague message that reads, "Hey, just thinking about you." But they do come back. Not always because they've changed, but because they realize what they lost. What do you do when that day comes? When the child who once wounded you starts to circle back, hoping to re-enter your life as if nothing happened? You don't react, you don't rush, and you don't return to who you were. Because by now, you've changed. You're no longer the parent who begs for connection. You're no longer the version of yourself who waited by the phone, hoping they'd see your worth. You've rebuilt. You've outgrown the pain. And the person you've become, they can't just come back to that version of you. Because that version doesn't exist anymore. You've risen, quietly, strongly, without applause but with dignity. You don't need to slam the door, but you don't need to open it wide either. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to ask hard questions. You're allowed to expect effort, not just apologies. And above all, you're allowed to walk away, again, if the energy feels the same. This isn't revenge. This isn't punishment. It's called evolution. Because by the time they realize what they had, you may already be too far ahead to turn around. And that's okay. Not every relationship has to be repaired. Some just need to be released, with grace. So let them come back if they do. Let them reach out. But let your response come from wisdom, not wounds. Let your silence have taught you something. And let your peace be more valuable than any history you once shared. Because here's the final truth I want to leave you with. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is disappear. Not to be cruel, but to be free. When you truly disappear from a place where you were unappreciated. When you stop posting to be seen. When you stop calling to feel connected. When you stop chasing what has stopped nourishing you. You create space for something better. You vanish not out of ego but out of self-respect. You let them sit with their decisions, their silence, their distance. And in your absence, something remarkable happens. They start to feel it. You were never just mom or dad. You were a presence, a comfort, a steady light. And now that light no longer shines in their direction. That silence, it speaks volumes. But more than what it says to them, it's what it says to you. You're finally honoring yourself. You're finally walking away, not with anger, not with guilt, but with quiet confidence. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. And the beauty of disappearing like this is that you leave behind not a storm, but a legacy. A quiet reminder that your love was never the problem. Your boundaries were never too much. Your absence is not an act of cruelty. It's the result of too many overlooked chances. You don't need to announce your growth. You live it. You don't need to convince them you were worthy. Your life speaks for itself now. So if you're wondering what to do after being hurt by your kids, it's this. You rise in silence, you reclaim your dignity, and you disappear from the emotional chaos they created. Not to punish, but to finally protect your peace. And if one day they do understand, if they do regret, if they realize what they lost and try to make it right, you'll be in a place strong enough to decide, not from desperation, but from wholeness. Because you didn't get there by accident. You got there step by step, breath by breath, choosing yourself over and over again. If this message spoke to your heart, I want you to know you are not alone. Your hurt is valid. Your healing is possible. And your peace, it's waiting for you on the other side of letting go. If you'd like to share your story or thoughts, please do in the comments. You never know who your words might comfort. And if this video gave you even a little bit of clarity or courage, give it a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future videos here on Strong Elderly Life, where we believe in aging with strength, grace, and wisdom. You are not broken. You are becoming. And here's to living your best life, with or without the people who didn't know how to treat you right. Take a deep breath. you've already begun.